All right. So hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unpacking Possibility. I'm your host, Traci Stein, and I'm really excited to introduce you to someone who is a supermom in her own right, even though we're going to talk today about why you don't have to be a supermom. Her name is Summers McKay. She's an entrepreneur, she's an author, she's an educator, and a really nice person. And chances are, actually, you probably do know who she is because she's got a super popular podcast. It's called the Optimist Daily, and it covers a zillion really interesting and uplifting topics, and we'll get more into that in a little bit. But welcome, Summers.
Traci, it's so lovely to be here. As I mentioned before we got started, I've spent the morning listening to you, and I just feel inspired to speak to such amazing people. So I am just honored to be in that cadre. Thank you for having me on your conversation in this podcast.
Well, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule because you really are doing it all. And I didn't mention that you're also a mom and you're a pet mom, and yes, you probably do about a zillion other things that I don't even know about yet, but I will by the end of our conversation today, I hope.
Well, it was funny. I was updating my LinkedIn profile or my Instagram profile. My children educated me on the relevance of putting pronouns in your profiles, and that it is a really good way of expressing that you're an LGBTQ plus advocate. And I had sort of just not done it. I didn't realize that I needed to do it too. So my kids convinced me to do it, or just educated me that I should do it. And I went in there and I realized that the profile was so me 20 years ago when I was like a mountain climber and a hiker and playing with dolphins and mermaid. And I was like, all right, let's get down to the basics. What am I now today? And first and foremost, I am a mom. I'm a mommy, right? I have a 2-year-old. She just turned 2, who was my first child from scratch. And then I had 2 other children that came with my husband. I feel like I got them sort of partially brewed, but I've been raising, them with my husband for the last 9 years. And so I am a mom. And I think that acknowledgement for women can be really, really challenging because I am also a CEO, and mom does come first. And so, and then in addition, I'm a pet parent. I have a menagerie of animals. We accidentally rescued some kittens from a parking lot 8 weeks ago, and we've got a dog and 2 other cats, and I love to garden and I love to explore. And while I am all those things I was in my 20s, the adventurer and the mountain climber and the triathlete, those are just like sort of on the waiting table right now. But I think that a lot of women who are professional, who do run companies, we often have to hide the notion that we are also a mom first. And that's part of what I have become very passionate about, is helping women find space and place to be both the mom and the CEO. And the notion of having it all doesn't actually mean doing it all. It means doing what's important. So that's sort of where I sit in the world today, which is a bit different than when I was getting up every morning and doing 20-mile runs and climbing mountains as often as I could. Now I look at them and I look at those pictures and I hit the spin bike when I can.
I want to just restate something you just said because it was so perfect, and I hope I get it right. But having it all doesn't mean doing it all. And that is so contrary to the messages we are very explicitly bombarded with, but also really implicitly bombarded with. And so I'm hoping you can talk a little bit more. Maybe I know you talk about supermoms, and if you could define what you mean when you say that and kind of where that term came from.
Well, the notion of the supermom sort of came with a step into feminism that was really telling women that you didn't have to choose between work and motherhood, that it was this hyper-inflated notion, superwoman to supermom, and it really became a very eclipsing paradigm for women, where you all of a sudden, every list, every checklist, everything you were supposed to do, you're supposed to feed your kids perfectly and show up at the gym and be on the spin bike and have the great hair and get to work. on time and do 100%, 110% at your job, and you were supposed to be the supermom was like better than expected, better than all the guys, right? No, we're not only moms, we're super moms. We're not only career women, we're better than the guys. And it ended up really isolating a lot of women, and the notion that we have to be super as opposed to just good, as opposed to just showing up and doing a good job, really has paralyzed a lot of women. When we look at the trajectory for leadership, and a lot of women tap out of leadership roles right around the time that they have young children. Now, I'm fortunate, I'm a later mom. I was already I actually was named CEO about 10 days before I delivered my daughter.
It's
so
pretty
I was
amazing
fortunate that I didn't have to step out of that leadership trajectory. But I 100% know 2 years in now, if I wasn't already in this seat, I would, like so many women, not be raising my hand for leadership opportunities, for taking on new projects, because you just don't know how you're going to pull it off. And there's this notion that you have to pull it off better and perfectly, as opposed to just doing a good job, that I think is so paralyzing, because nobody's perfect. We are all so messy. And this is the first time I've brushed my hair in 3 days. and we pretend that we're not, right? We feel like this notion of a supermom, that we have to be perfect. And I just want to tell the world and tell young women who are early in their careers with young children, everyone is messy, everyone is exhausted, nobody has any idea how they're going to do it. We don't know how we're going to pull this off. You will, in fact, feed your kids like goldfish one night for dinner, and it's okay. And you will also be late to a meeting and do an only okay job at a project, and that is also okay. You just get, we get to not have to be super. We can just be good.
So important, everything you're saying. And I'm having a flood of thoughts that I hope I can organize well enough to ask you in some sort of semblance of order.
Well, we've got time, so if it's not in order, it will be.
We'll come on back to it. But, you know, I'm very struck by the fact that, you know, I feel like there's a part of us, a part of, you know, most women that kind of has a sense that, you know, this kind of glossy, Instagram worthy, my kids look clean and perfect and well behaved and, you know, perfectly dressed, and you know, the moms look like they, you know, like they should be on a magazine cover, and every picture is happy, and somehow they're also incredibly successful professionally. I'm wondering whether you think the greatest pressure at this point comes from inside, you know, because we are bombarded from that, or the fear of external kind of judgment.
I think it's twofold. I think the self-comparisons that we do, you know, my Instagram feed, if you've had a chance to look at it, I pride myself on terrible hair, makeup-free selfies, dark roots, haven't had, you know, because I think that it's so, you know, the messy, but my child is also adorable and she's healthy, and my big kids who aren't on my social media are likewise adorable and healthy. I think that we do create a tremendous amount of comparative pressure when we look at our friends, our colleagues, or people we don't even know on social.
Yeah.
And I think what we also need to remember is that we only post the good stuff. So they're only posting the good stuff. It's so funny because if we think about, before we even started recording, we were talking about, you know, in my house right now, it looks like my desk is all perfect. But in fact, I have my keyboard sitting on this big plush pillow, and then 2 pillows that my cats normally sleep on here, and then another pillow all around the microphone, because I'm trying to pretend that I live in a perfect recording studio. No, I live in a big, messy place full of animals and kids, and anyone who's listened to a podcast, you've heard the dog barking and the UPS guy show up. And I think Amazon guys actually know to come exactly when you're podcast recording. I actually think it's part of Amazon marketing, right? They're listening through our microchips. But it's amazing how forgiving our audiences can be when they listen to us and they know that even though we're here recording these podcasts with our wisdom, they are in it with us. We are all just as messy and disorganized and forgetful every once in a while as everybody else.
Absolutely. And I'm laughing as you're saying that about the Amazon guide, because I had 2 signs made that I stick out in front, and it basically, they're a little funny and a little threatening about not ringing the doorbell right now, because my dogs will go nuts and bark for 20 minutes.
Yeah. I truly don't think my dog used to bark as much before I started recording a podcast, but it was almost as if she realized that she wanted her voice in the message too. So it's one of the things that we're talking about. And if you've gotten the first part of the audio, you've heard it, but if not, we'll just recap a little bit. But this notion of perfection that women are absorbed with, this notion of supermom, where they have to be super and where they have to do everything meticulously, and their homes and their lives and their children and their careers have to be perfect. And the idea of supermom, when it came about, really was meant to be empowering. What it has transformed into is a bit diminishing, because
Yes.
nobody's saying super dad, right? Nobody's saying that we have to be super dads, right? You're just dad and you have your career and you do the best you can. And I'm so excited to help younger generations of women who are entering their career trajectory or entering motherhood know that perfection is just not the goal. It's not even, it's not even on the board.
It's, and I do these affirmations, and one of them is, perfection is an illusion that gets in the way of learning, because that's kind of what we're all here to do. We're not here to get everything perfect. Otherwise, kind of, what's the point?
Right.
We don't learn from that. That's, the idea is soothing to the ego, but it's not attainable, and it just causes suffering, actually. Mm-hmm. The idea that we have to be there. And so I'm so glad you're talking about this. I also want to be careful that I don't offend men in the audience, but I was laughing when you were saying there's not super dad, this kind of phenomenon of having to be perfectly groomed and the perfect parent and the perfect person at work and the perfect cook, and your house has to be immaculate. Like when I have a great husband, but he, I joked with him that the standards are not the same. And, sometimes when he's done the dishes, he's kind of hoping for a little bit of a parade, And meanwhile, I might be up till like midnight if people are coming, because I'm like, endlessly straightening things.
Right. Right. Well, it's funny. My husband actually has a Superman tattoo on his forearm, right? It's funny because prior to him, 2 guys I dated also dressed as Superman for Halloween. So I think I might have a type. But this idea of this is one of the things that I find most challenging about it, is when I was really struggling, when COVID hit, my whole life changed, because previously my daughter, my brand new itty bitty perfect 3-month-old daughter, was delivered by me at 8 a.m. to a daycare. We would leave the house at 7 a.m. I would put on the breast pump while driving, pumping milk to make sure she had it, deliver her to daycare, which was like a good enough daycare, but it was I just picked it because it was available. And I'd drop her off, and then I'd drop off the milk, and then I'd drive to work, and I'd have 2 meetings, and then I'd sit in the basement of our company because we didn't have a place for me to privately pump, and I'd pump milk, and then I'd have 2 more meetings, and then I'd go for lunch, and then I'd have 2 more meetings, and then I'd pick her up and pump milk and leave at 5. And it was literally the most miserable life I can imagine as a mom. I was trying so hard to do the supermom, to do it perfect. I can get to work. I can look good. My daughter can be cared for. And the only thing that I know that I did do right for us is that in that time frame, my daughter and I co-slept, because I knew that I needed to have some kind of closeness and intimacy and proximity with her so that she knew I was hers. And frankly, I knew she was mine. And then COVID hit, and we got sent home. And all of a sudden my office had to deal with the fact that I was going to be sitting in my chair, breast pumping milk on the Zoom call while holding a baby. And I had to completely reinvent how I was going to be a CEO. And it was such a heartbreaking gift, but it was also such a beautiful gift because it was messy and it was hard. And my husband and I split the days. He had the baby
Wow.
from 8 till, first it was 8 till 1, and then it was 8 till noon, and then it was 8 till 11. and I had her in the afternoons. And at that time, all she knew soothing wise was driving, because she and I had spent so much time in the car with these, hour-long commutes both ways. So my husband would just drive up and down the coast with her.
Wow.
To soothe her, because that's the only thing he could do without me. And now we, eventually about 7 months into COVID, we did at that point feel safe enough to hire out a nanny to come into our home. But we couldn't afford a full-time nanny. We could afford a part-time nanny. And so she took some of the morning hours. She basically gave us a bridge between the time when we could care for our daughter. And it helped me reinvent what showing up to work meant, what doing a good job meant. I was quickly able to abandon the notion of this perfect fitness, perfect appearance, perfect, being the first one to the meeting and the one with the best notes and the best CEO that had ever been invented. And I was able to just say, no, good enough is good enough. And in releasing that pressure of perfection, our business has grown. We've had
Amazing.
month over month, it just continues to explode because we no longer felt this structural pressure of perfection. The website's not perfect. Okay, well, what's the priority? The priority is our content. The priority is our stories. The priority is our writers. We'll get around to fixing, we'll get around to cleaning the kitchen. But right now, the priority is the content we deliver. So for me, this getting rid of the commute. For me, getting rid of the commute changed my life. And I believe that work from home continues and will, for many women, be a path to success and ongoing leadership. Not having to have that as part of our life. One, we know it's good for Earth, right? Because we don't all need to be in our cars. And then two, I actually think it's very good for families and very good for many women. Some women prefer to be in an office away from their home or don't have the space in their home. But that extensive, must be in a place to do a job notion for those of us who have that kind of position has really been lifted. And then two, recognizing, I think I've said it 110 times, but it doesn't have to be perfect. It can just be really good. And it turns out people like really good food. Nobody wants a perfect meal. That's boring. You want a really good meal.
And also, this idea of perfect, I think we all create our own version. And I think that changes in each era what that means. I feel like now it includes so much more because we have the potential to cram so much more into our day because of all of our technology and and also increased opportunity, which is good. But everybody, the things we put pressure on ourselves to be perfect about might be things other people don't even notice or care about.
Right.
Like you said, that meal doesn't have to be exquisite for it to be really enjoyable.
Yeah. And I think that you just said here too, those things that we put pressure on ourselves about might not be things that people care about. It's closing that gap in between what is it that we want to show up in the world to do, to offer, to be, and when I was going through kind of my Instagram profile of who am I, right? I'm Summers McKay, she, her, mommy, CEO, wife, gardener, explorer, pet parent. That's who I want to show up in the world to be. I don't want to show up in the world as an Instagram influencer.
Right.
I don't want to show up in the world as a perfect cook who nails her HelloFresh, right? And at some point in this whole journey, I actually said to my husband, honey, I have to tell you, I just can't prioritize a great family dinner every night. I'm gonna get the pre-made meals that are, you throw in the oven from, they're fresh, they're pre-made, they're good, they're healthy, but I just can't prioritize an extra 45 minutes of food perfection, or like it's going to be healthy. And if it's too bland and y'all don't like it, all the big kids, everybody can take a day of the week that they're in charge of the food. Because for me, what's a priority is not that piece. And also, and I will say this with some sort of nervousness, but it also stopped being a priority for me to be super fit. I
Totally get
stopped
it.
worrying about, for 2 years, I prioritized breastfeeding my daughter. I prioritized nurturing her. I prioritized getting as much rest as possible. So when, the notion of when the baby sleeps, you sleep is a bit silly because every mom's like, well, then you don't do anything else. Except for that's also okay, right?
Right.
So go to bed early at night. So I made a choice for 2 years to just not prioritize being in top-notch shape. And I'm still carrying the baby weight, which is such an American idea, right? That we should just
Right.
disabuse ourselves of. And I'm finally going back to spin classes and feeling good about it, but I'm doing it because I want to, not because I have any pressure. So in this whole notion of having it all means doing it all, you can't. Having it all means doing what's important to you and figuring out that matrix of what matters most to you.
I love that you're talking about that for a few reasons. One is that there's just a limited amount of time and energy that we all have. And if we don't know what our priorities are, we can't make decisions that will leave us feeling okay.
Right.
And I think people who take care of other people, and that's pretty much every mom, right? There's something in us that says, at the end of the day, this caretaking is not negotiable.
Right.
So we
Right.
have to, juggle a little bit about what else is going to get how much time and energy. And I think it's important, you want to have stuff for yourself, but you also don't want to not do the thing that is most important to you. And so knowing
Well,
what's important is vital.
exactly. And I think one of the things about Supermom, or one of the things about leaning in, and there's been so many books and stories
Yeah.
about women leaning into their careers. But one of the things that I think much of that conversation has avoided is allowing women to say, priority first and foremost, I'm a mom. And the idea that someone would say before they talk about their careers that they are a mom is very intimidating to women. I had a conversation with a young woman, a mom in my daughter's school, who's earlier in her career stage than I am. And she was saying, she was really reticent to tell any of the other women that she works for and under, all who have children, that she really wanted to prioritize being a mom too. She felt this shame because there's this notion that if you prioritize motherhood, then you must not be prioritizing your work. And that is absolute hogwash, right?
Right.
It's not either or, and it's not do it all. It is that you can prioritize motherhood. You can love your children. When your child is sick, you go.
Right.
And as leaders, those of us who are women, mothers further on in our careers, and certainly guys, too, as well, I think we have to lift that pressure we put on people of pretending that we don't also super prioritize our children. I had a lot of times people have said that my husband, when my daughter's school gets shut down, or my husband travels a tremendous amount for work, he has a very busy career and he is a great dad, but he is not the primary parent. He's not the primary caregiver. And when people have said, oh, well, your husband, why can't your husband pick her up? Or why can't you? I really look back at those comments and I say, the mark of a woman having a successful career is not tied exclusively to the idea that her partner takes over primary parenting. That's just not true.
Right.
And women need to be allowed, and any parent who chooses to be the primary parent and chooses to have a successful career needs to be given permission that is absolutely okay, honorable, effective, and actually makes for great leadership.
Right. No, it's so true. And those things get negotiated in each couple.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
and it's you're making me think about a question that had come up earlier as you were talking, because you're kind of alluding to the feedback either that people fear that may or may
Yes.
not come, and then the feedback
Right.
that people might actually get.
Right.
Now,
Right.
sometimes that feedback is from someone who thinks, whatever whatever your idea of prioritizing being a parent is, that you need to be doing it more or their way, or kind of in an older school way, maybe, which
Right.
leaves even less room for your work.
Right.
But then also that, that pressure to prioritize work, or that pressure to prioritize trying to look like Barbie going to work and parenting. And, how do you recommend people deal with people's either intentionally helpful comments, or the ones that they intend to be helpful, but that just don't feel helpful?
I think that's a tough question. I love in podcasts when people are like, "That's a great question," because they're buying themselves time. I'm saying that's a tough question because I'm buying myself time to think
And
it
you
through.
don't, it's okay
And
not to
but
know,
yeah,
it's not
I
easy.
I won't give advice, but I will say my experience.
Perfect.
And my experience has been that when it first started happening, because when we first moved, we relocated our family to Austin, Texas, and my husband's business was still in California substantially. I was here alone a lot with the baby. She was getting sick constantly at her new school because she'd been COVID quarantined and then thrown in with a bunch of kids. And of course, they all got sick constantly. And I started getting a lot of comments from people that I love and admire who were saying, "Oh, well, you're basically a single mom. You're basically a single mom." And that hit me so hard because it felt like a judgment on my marriage. It felt like a judgment on my choices of partner. It felt like a judgment on my choices of moving. It felt like, and it really kicked me to the core. I mean, it was gut wrenching every time. But what I realized two things. One, a lot of people were saying it to me because that's actually what I was putting out in the world, right? I was feeling kind of victimed by this situation because I didn't know how to handle it. And then two, I needed to stop giving people permission to say that. And instead, I needed to find a new way to have that conversation. And so I started first with, one of my colleagues at the Optimist Daily. And I said, "I don't know if you mean to make me feel this way, but it makes me feel this way. And I don't have another term or explanation as to how to define what it is I'm going through, but I know it's not single parenting. I know that I have a supportive partner. And I also don't want to take credit for being a single mom. Single moms or single parents have it a lot tougher than I do. I am just kind of a mess right now." And so
And that's
my
okay to
yeah,
speak,
and
and that's
that's
okay.
exactly, and that's okay. And I don't need the, checkmate of judgment that even if their intention was never to be judgmental, it felt that way to me. So my choice was to acknowledge, one, that I was putting out that into the world a little bit. I was getting advice, you get what you seek, right? So I was, in some part, I was seeking that feeling of loneliness, and I was putting it out there in the world that I did feel very much alone. And then I was also willing to say, "I'd like this to stop," because I don't, that cycle of negative, I guess, of negative affirmation, which I'm not sure is a phrase, but it seems like, that affirmation of what was making me feel bad was not moving us toward the goal. And when I did this, and I did this with colleagues, and I did this with friends, and I said, part of what I have been putting out there is this feeling of loneliness, but what I need to stop is the idea that my husband's giving up his career is the answer, because that's exactly what one would say to a woman, is like, "Oh, well, you need to give up your career and be more focused on your family." So evolving the conversation, acknowledging that the advice or feedback is possibly because of what you're putting out, and then changing what it is that you want to come back. What I wanted to come back to me were community solutions, were ideas, was an acknowledgement from my team that it was okay if there was a day I had to go because somebody at the school got COVID and I had to go pick up the baby and she was going to be mine for 5 days. But that they also knew I was going to do a great job at my job. I was going to work at night when she was sleeping. I was going to work in the morning. We were going to have conference calls while I was driving her, now in the outskirts, in the fields of Texas as opposed to the coast of California. And what I needed from the world was a positive affirmation that, okay, this is going to look different, but it's going to be okay. And now I sit in a seat very comfortably where it is going to be okay. And every month we're doing better and she's getting better at her routine and my husband's travel. And meanwhile, this is one little thing I will say. While I stopped making it about my marriage and being frustrated with my husband being gone so much, when that man is in town, he is mowing the lawn. The dishes are perfect. It almost is like,
well, he's Superman. He's got the tattoo.
Yeah, it gave him space. It gave him space to not be in trouble for traveling for work all the time, and instead to be a really great partner to me all the time and a really helpful partner when he's in town. So that's my experience. Take from it the advice you might gain. But know that people will give you feedback that sometimes doesn't feel good. And it's an opportunity to say, what would feel good? What do you need?
I love that you were so honest and thoughtful about that process because it's so hard. Because, on the one hand, I think we all just want to be able to express ourselves when we're feeling overwhelmed. And I think sometimes we just want people to get where we're coming from instead of solving it.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes people's efforts at compassion are to empathize with what they feel is the thing that is hurtful to us or the thing that we wish would change. And it's hard. We're human beings. We can both have feelings of stress or resentment or just adjustment, the adjustment from one way of living to another, or one place to another. But I think it's to your credit that you were able to find a way to just say, like, this may not be your intention, but this is how it felt, and it wasn't helpful, and to know what you needed. It's just so hard. We're all figuring life out one day at a time.
Well, I call myself a determined optimist, right? And the company that I run is the Optimist Daily. I host the Optimist Daily update. And one of the things that's really a critical tenet of our business is acknowledging that the world has challenges. There are a lot of challenges. We have climate challenges, we have social justice challenges, we have economic challenges. And with each and every one of those challenges, there is a solution. And there's an opportunity for a dialogue about solution. And part of why I am so transparent on my social, right? Of course, when I was going through this, I was sharing it on social media, and friends were like, oh, she must really be having a hard time because people only show the good stuff on social. And it made me laugh because I was like, no, I'm not having any rougher time than I'm sharing. This is just my reality. This is just my truth. This is me exhausted, knowing that life isn't working and we're going to have to just do a quick reinvention. And life and the world are a series of reinventions, right? We have to constantly come up with new solutions. And the only way we're going to do that is if we are transparent about the problems that we face. And I think one of the, whether it is, the headline on the Optimist Daily today, which is about it's an amazing organization called Book Dash that's making South African children's accessibility to books, more equal and taking it out of the, hands of the publishers and putting it into the creators. Or it's a conversation about, so that what that is that's a solution for high levels of illiteracy for Black children in South Africa. Right. That is a solution for a really, really challenging problem that has long-term negative effects on the prosperity of communities and the prosperity of families, but it's a solution. And I think with talking about motherhood and work. And, we all need a new manual for 2021. Nobody knows how to work 2021. Nobody's going to know how to work 2022, whether it's like remembering to record the Zoom call or accidentally, my colleague accidentally locked my other colleague in the office because they went back to a physical office and they locked each other in because nobody knows how to work 2021. But part of it is acknowledging that we just don't, right? We don't, and we have to have conversations about how we can make this new emerging world that we're kind of peering out into a better, more productive, more collaborative, and forward-thinking, solution-focused world.
I think it's fantastic what you're doing. And I want to use this opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about your podcast, because you're the co-host of the Optimist Daily. You have over 500,000 listeners a week or something? I
don't think it's that many a week. I know that we've hit some recent milestones. We get over 1 million views on our content every month. So, but that's in aggregate from the pod and the website and the social. So, I don't have the exact numbers, but yeah, we have kind of an unreal amount of people who are listening to us talk every morning.
I mean, first of all, it's amazing that you're doing a daily podcast. I think, until I started this, and I'm lucky if I get something out every week, it's a much newer podcast. I'm in awe that you're doing this podcast every day that really touches people. People are thirsting for good news. And your content is really interesting. I listened to a few episodes. And I learned a lot. I learned about everything from sheep grazing near solar farms. Tell me.
I love that solution. I love that solution.
Pollinator plants and
so that one I want to touch on. So this is rethinking design, right? And when we look at the way we design our buildings or our industrial structures, this is rethinking solar farms and recognizing that the area underneath all of those solar panels is actually a really verdant, protected area that can contribute to the overall ecological health of an environment. So that particular solution talked about how grazing cattle, or I think it was grazing goats, right? It might have been goats or sheep, kind of a lower level grazer, as well as planting pollinator plants to assist bee populations. Birds, bees, and bugs are totally my jam. So not just having this big, everybody who lives in California and has driven to Vegas, right? You drive by that ridiculous solar farm and it's just the size of 87 football fields. And the ground is it's like, what else could we do with this space? How can we re-envision this very effective solution, right? This energy solution that couldn't be more perfect for that area because of the massive amounts of sun, but you're also creating an ecosystem underneath that can create more opportunity for a better, and this is all the sort of agroforestry, agro-solar, agro-industry solution. But that one's really fun to talk about because one of my big things is like wind turbines and determining how to make wind energy more efficient, as well as ensure that we can have a more recyclable wind turbine. Because one of the biggest problems, and you don't even think about this, is that those wind turbines they're made with all this epoxy and fiberglass, and they can't really be used for anything else once they've been retired, but they also get beat up a ton because they're spinning with the wind. Nice. So what do we do with those wind turbines? And there's so many fun design solutions coming out of it. So it's rethinking, these ecological challenges. And the way that Christy and I do it, it's a cup of coffee in the morning. We like to consider it our coffee salon where you hear, about my latest cat escapades and Christy's, Christy's adventures being Christy. And then we talk about these solutions and we share on a daily basis. The Optimist Daily publishes 10 positive news stories every single day. We have a writing team that is worldwide. The only way I could possibly participate in a daily podcast would be because of this unbelievable team we have, right? And we have a format and we have writers and we have a producer and we pull it off. And it is extraordinary that we do. I just get to be on board of the ship. But the conversations are really, really fun. And we've been so honored by people who have written in and just, people we didn't even know. Actually, Christy was asked to officiate someone's wedding.
Oh my goodness.
It was really, really fun.
That's pretty high praise.
I know. And because they, they like the approachability of some of these really big challenges. And, the social justice conversation came with such a flood into media dialogue. And it's so needed to be continued and not radicalized in conversation and not polarized. And social media has just such an offensive way of polarizing things. A news person that I have great admiration for, who runs a regional newspaper, and I are friends on Facebook. And yesterday she commented kind of a pithy comment on a relatively inflammatory post from a news person, a blogger person, about Simone Biles choosing to exit the Olympics. And this guy, I've never read any of this stuff. I wouldn't know any of his stuff. But all of a sudden, Facebook says, hey, Summers, your friend who you like just made this comment. You should check it out. So I went down the rabbit hole, 20 minutes of looking at this guy's stuff and getting riled up and, oh, he's so offensive. And then I said, wait, I have to remind my friend that we both just got trapped. Right. And my dog is snoring.
That's okay. I like that. I like that your dog is with you.
Yeah. And exactly. We both got trapped by this downward spiral that happens in social media. And what the Optimist Daily is so committed to is changing that spiral to an upward climb. We don't need to be in this perpetual downward spiral of inflammation, negativity, pithy comments to, checkmate each other with, I just said that, you just said this. Instead, we need to elevate the dialogue to focus on solutions.
I love that you said that. And it is, I think it is especially hard now, and social media has both enabled people to be connected in a way that I think has been really important, but has also been a way for people to weaponize misinformation or disinformation or,
just inflammation.
Yes. Yeah. Beautifully said. And I wanted to touch base on something you said at the beginning of the podcast. And it was just kind of an aside when you were talking about your LinkedIn bio, because I think it's important. You were talking about how your older kids had said, oh, it's really important to be thoughtful about the use of pronouns. And I was looking at my Zoom realizing, oh, I got to get that on there. I'm a little slower to the game, but I'm getting, there, like I'm updating various, Instagram and so forth. But it doesn't cost anything to be compassionate, and being inclusive and thoughtful and compassionate is part of being optimistic and part of making the world a better place to be. And actually, a young family member just came out to my family as non-binary, and that has been challenging for some family members. And the bigger challenge, believe it or not, has been the pronouns. Right. Because, somebody in their 70s or 80s may not understand that. It's so new. Yeah. And I found myself just explaining that, I slip up sometimes too, because in my mind, I remember this person's life before this coming out, and absolutely, and the pronoun that worked then. And but I said, it's okay if you don't fully understand it, or if it doesn't reflect your lived experience. But what does it cost you to just use a pronoun that lets somebody know that you see them and you honor them and you respect them? And we could take that thoughtfulness to, like what you were saying about Simone Biles, like how great that she decided to put herself first. Who knows better than she does about what she needs to do?
Right.
And even if somebody
Well,
doesn't get it, they don't have to post some horror show about
exactly, like
spirited horror
some
show.
super antagonistic. And whether I will say that it's also like those in support or those against, everybody gets really antagonistic. And
Right.
I read a beautiful piece. So fun fact, I interned with Carrie Strug after her
Oh,
Olympic
wow.
situation, after her Olympic win and triumph on that terribly dangerous situation. I interned at Entertainment Tonight. I think I was, I don't know, 18 or 19 at the time in college. And, but I read this really beautiful piece remarking on that Carrie Strug, continued to compete under extreme pain. And a woman had written a piece about how her children were watching it and they were really concerned. They were like, why did she was hurt? Why did she keep playing? Why didn't she stop? And the idea that, just as you were saying with the pronouns and the generational challenge that happens, right? Previously, the idea of like you keep fighting, you fight through the pain was patriotic, right? And the idea that was the goal, or that gender was fixed, was also a notion from different generations. And I think what I would say is to those who are, be as compassionate to the older generation who does not
Absolutely.
have the framework as you are to those who are part of the changing framework. Because if we are constantly like, if you're, you see all the time on social media, people who align with your beliefs, and they're so radicalized in their focus of, and you see somebody who says like, I really like X and you really like X too. So you agree with it, but it doesn't mean that I guess I'm not being totally cogent in my thoughts here, but participating in extreme support can be just as isolating as participating in extreme, anti-support, right? We have to be generous to people as this evolves at all generations.
We just, being more compassionate and being
Yes.
more thoughtful about how we engage with people virtually, in person, I think would just go such a long way. And I love that, your work for 20 plus years or more, you don't look like you could be that old, but so I'm sure you were like a child.
It's all the baby weight. It's the baby weight. No wrinkles.
But the idea of do good, do well in
yes.
your business endeavors.
Yeah.
Like what we do matters, and how we do it matters, and what we put out there matters. And in this time of increased social isolation and social tension and polarization, the fact that people can find a resource where they feel like they're connecting to you and Christy, and and learning something that they didn't know, that's not using up a ton of bandwidth, because it's not hours and hours of content that they have to sit through. You've done the work, you and your team, but they're learning something about how we can make the world a better place, how we can, do good in the world.
Well, we really want, our goal is to get 100 million people to wake up every morning with a solutions oriented mindset. And that's the end goal, right? If we could get people waking up in the morning thinking, what are the solutions? Because we know the problems, we know them, and we're talking about them, and you see them everywhere. But you wake up in the morning and you say, what solution can I put to the world today? That would be success for the Optimist Daily. And that would be success for me personally. We've started this new challenge on the podcast that each week, at the end of the week, we review kind of the theme of the previous 5 days, and we decide which one we're going to commit to over the weekend. So which solution we're going to try to put into our own lives, because not just talking about solutions, but actually doing them. So I am embarking in this next weekend on a journey into no single-use plastics, which I find to be almost impossible with a toddler.
I know.
And so when I fail miserably at my attempt of single-use plastics, I will share just how hard it was. But we are trying not only to illuminate people into these ideas and this conversation, this solution conversation, but also take it into practice into each and every one of our lives. So that's the hope. And I love what I do. I love my team. I am so fortunate to be where I am in my career and where I am in motherhood so that I can disabuse this world of the notion of supermom, right? And the idea, my husband got me a license plate that says Mom CEO.
Aww.
And for the first 3 weeks, I didn't pick it up from the DMV because I felt like it was bragging, and it made me feel really nervous. And then he and I sat down and I asked, what does it mean to you? And he's like, because you pull it off. You pull it off and you figure it out, and you're a great mom and you're a great CEO. And that made me realize that even though I don't feel perfect at either, I'm okay. I do good. I do, according to others, great. Of course, the self-doubt's still in there, and is it good enough? But it is. And so it's on my car, and it makes me laugh. And Brennan, my daughter, sees it and says, "Pink license plate," because of course it's bright pink. So there you go. I think that it's time for us all to be, as you said, compassionate and gentle to one another into figuring out what this new world looks like, because we want diverse leadership. We want women and men to be leading companies together and leading industries and coming up with the solutions. We know that businesses do better when they have women at the leadership table. We know that solutions are more ecological, have more of a focus on climate, inclusivity, and social justice when there are diverse leadership roles and diverse boards. And this is all, part of that funnel that I want to ensure our future. I want my daughter to never wonder whether or not she can do her job and be a mom.
I love that. Summers, tell people where the best places to learn more about you are.
Okay. Well, you can follow me on Instagram, but as I said, I am not an Instagram influencer. So just look for Summers McKay anywhere on the internet if you want to see funny pictures of my cat and me with bad hair. If you are looking for solutions news and focus news, follow the Optimist Daily. Just search Optimist Daily. Our site is optimistdaily.com. And you are welcome to reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook, anywhere that you can find me or the Optimist Daily to further this conversation on solutions and just making this world a better place.
Oh, I love that. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. This has been terrific. And I can't wait to check out more of your fantastic podcasts and Optimist Daily and more.
Well, thank you, Traci. And thank you for adding me to your roster of extraordinary guests. I feel fortunate to be here with you.
Well, likewise. This has been an episode of Unpacking Possibility. You can learn more about Summers McKay all over the internet and on the websites you just mentioned. And until next time, be well.